So we look at each other,
Okay.
not to the camera. Sure. Just a moment.
And the angle of the seat's fine?
Yeah, this is good. This is good. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation.
Absolutely. Thank you for
I
inviting me.
know you have a very busy schedule of work and travel, and so I really appreciate it.
Happy to.
You know that I have interviewed also your father.
Yes.
And actually, in about 300 programs I have recorded, this will be the first time I interview someone whose father I have also interviewed. It happened to interview someone whose mother I had interviewed, but for the first time, it's father and son.
Well, I'm honored to be that first one. Thank you.
And your father has visited several times Romania, and I had been privileged to be his translator several times there.
Excellent.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit from your side now about your family.
Well, I grew up one of four, and I was the
What you're
youngest.
the youngest.
I was the youngest one. I was the only boy.
Oh,
And
so three older sisters.
three older sisters.
Quite interesting
Yes.
and unusual.
Yes, three older sisters, and grew up primarily in upstate New York, rural upstate New York, a lot of cows and farmland.
Oh, interesting.
And when we were 13, I moved to Canada, outside of Toronto, and finished grade 8 there, and then went to academy at Kingsway College. And after academy, I went to Atlantic Union College in Massachusetts, and that's where I met my wife, Elizabeth Tomasian. And we were married after college, after a few years after college. And we now have actually 4 kids as well. Not planned, but 4 kids. And 2 girls and 2 boys, and we're very blessed.
Excellent. Now let's go back and take it,
Sure.
cut it in smaller pieces.
Sure, absolutely.
So what are your earliest memories of family, especially related to faith, worship, maybe church?
Sure. Some of my earliest memories are actually of my grandmother and us, when we'd be praying together, if we'd go to my grandmother's apartment to sleep over, my sister and I.
It was the maternal or the paternal?
Paternal.
Paternal.
Yeah.
So she was from...
Yeah, she lived near us.
But originally from
Yugoslavia. Yes.
Yeah.
And so she always lived close to us. Her husband, my grandfather, paternal grandfather, was in a nursing home because he had Parkinson's disease. And so and that happened when I was very little. So they always lived close to my father and my parents, a few miles or 10, 15 minutes away. And I would remember staying over at their house with my sister, just 2 years older than me. And I remember when we would pray and have a little worship before we go to bed, we'd always ask my grandmother to pray in Yugoslavian.
Oh.
And we didn't understand Yugoslavian. We never learned it other than a couple simple, words. And I don't know why, and we would be very quiet and listen the entire time, but we just loved how it sounded and the way that she, spoke to God in her comfortable, natural language.
Yes.
We just always liked. So I recall that, and growing up around Union Springs, there's an Adventist academy there, and an elementary school, and a church, a pretty good Adventist population. My memories were very much of always involved in, there was always vacation Bible school, camp meeting was there, at the school doing activities or events, at church, watching our church getting built, because before it was in the gymnasium, and then they built the church.
Interesting.
So there was always something happening there, and so there's just, it's very integrated with my memories, because that was the entertainment, that was the activity, that was what was very important in our lives. And so, I guess because there was so much of that in our lives, it was front and center of my mind constantly. So church was always there.
Interesting.
Church
So
was
your father was the pastor of the church?
No, he was actually at the conference office. He started as secretary and treasurer, and that's why we moved there. And that was about 45 minutes away. But we lived in Union Springs because it was close to the school. And,
I see.
And then upstate New York is very large, and he was always traveling around the road. So I don't know how much he was even in the office anyways.
Yeah. I suppose it was an area with sparse population.
I don't know the exact numbers. Probably about 1,200 people in that town, and maybe 1,200 cows also. Very small. We never even locked the doors to the house unless you were
the
gone.
next town or quite far.
Probably 10 minutes away. Next town.
Not that far.
Not terribly far, but if you wanted to go to a real grocery store, it was probably 20 minutes away. And then, I still recall a couple times a year you go to the big city, which is maybe about 100,000 people, Syracuse, and that's where you do Christmas shopping at the big mall, and that's maybe the 45 minutes away where the conference was. So
lots of driving.
Lots of driving and farmland everywhere, yes.
And were you also involved in gardening and things like that? Why do you laugh?
I hope my sisters don't watch this. Yes, we had actually a large, it was very open there. So we had, acre and a half of land for our house. And our garden must have been a quarter of an acre. It was large. And maybe it wasn't that big, but as a kid, it felt that large. And we had rows and rows of corn and beans and everything you could think of. And as kids, we had to go down and weed the garden all summer and make sure it was watered if it was dry. Take care of the garden all summer long. So that was definitely a part of our lives. And then also, and when you have 4 kids, you have to feed them. I guess that's probably an economical way too. And then just growing up in that area, I have fond memories of. It was time to go cherry picking, or you go pick the berries, or you go pick the
But why
fruit.
did you say that you hope your sister are not
Well,
going to...
because I would always complain about my time to go, weed, and they would say, you have to do it first thing in the morning because it's cool.
Yes.
And I would play around, and I still had to do it, so I would inevitably be out there at 2 o'clock and complain about how hot it is and the bugs and so they would always sit there on the porch drinking lemonade, laughing at me, doing my work. And so, but we have, fond memories. I have a little garden now, but, we would have to, kill the tomato worms and someone would get squirted by the worms. There was a lot of work there, but I would complain a lot about it as a kid, so it's ironic that I have a garden myself now.
But I think in time you changed your attitude to manual work, because I know all along your schooling you worked as well.
Yeah, I even started in elementary school mowing lawns for neighbors, and even Pathfinders, you're raising funds, so we'd be out there selling brooms and to raise money and everything.
Selling brooms.
Well, there was a broom factory at the academy there, and so we would sell the brooms and you'd make some money for the Pathfinders.
That reminds me, from my childhood, they were. How to call them, like colporteurs,
Oh, yes.
with brooms going from
really?
door to door.
I didn't know they sold brooms.
With a big bunch of brooms in their back.
Oh my! Well, we just had one as an example, and then we bring them later. But that wasn't very much of my. But in academy, I had 2 jobs. So I was worked in the stock room at an Adventist book center, stocking the cans of veggie meat in the freezer section, and sometimes the books. I did that for all 4 years in academy, and I also worked at a greenhouse and the landscaping.
Oh.
The school had started a greenhouse there, the academy, and it was for retail. The public would come and buy it.
Really?
Yeah. And then we would also then do landscaping on the grounds of the academy. And so that was I did that for all 4 years as well.
It was your choice. You had to. How it happened? And
part of it.
what were your feelings about it?
Part of it was just it was presented to me that that's just the way we're going to do
I
it.
see.
For at least for the job at the greenhouse. That was my part to help pay for the school. And my sisters had all had various jobs as they went through school too. And so as the fourth one,
Yeah, you just
it's just
follow
normal.
the steps.
Yeah, and so to me, I didn't think about it. I also, if there's a problem, I like to find a way to solve it. And so I had always felt like I needed some money to do something. I don't know what was so important then, but and so getting the job at the Adventist Book Center was to help get a little extra cash as well. And so I would work hours at one place and then hours at the other place, and some of it went to help pay for school as well, and others would go in my bank account and be used for various activities. So part of it I enjoyed. I never really enjoyed the academic part so much of schooling as much. And so to me, working helped me to apply some of those skills, tangibly. And so I think I enjoyed that part of it a lot.
Do you think it shaped, your later life in a way?
I think so, because you can learn quite a bit in the classroom. And as I said, I don't think I was a great student, to be honest with you. I was probably an okay student. But I enjoyed the practical parts of working, and sometimes things don't make as much sense in the classroom. But then when you're out in the real world, they then make sense. And I think what it really helped shape is help develop a work ethic in me as well. And so while you're going through school, learning all the different algebra and science elements, by the time you're ready to finish schooling and go do work, your resume already has quite a few work experiences on it. I worked all through college, and so when you apply for a job, I see resumes now from students, and some have great academic experiences and almost no work experiences. And you become a little leery of those individuals, because you wonder, are they used to a work environment? Do they know how it is to work with a boss? Do they, how are they going to operate in that environment? When you see a balanced resume of someone that has good grades and some work experience, then you know that they've been tested a little bit. And so that helps to be able to, I think, quickly, contribute to your job and be more effective.
Sure. You are quite involved in educational activities. We'll speak more about that. Students nowadays, do they have similar opportunities to work during school?
I think in a lot of our schools they do. I think overall in Adventist education there's less and less of that, just because unfortunately some of those, you have to be able to at least not lose money usually operating those businesses on campuses. And unfortunately over time many of those industries have shut down. And so there's less and less of that, I think. Oftentimes students will go off of campus to get a job at a local convenience store or whatever it may be. And then also I think there's a little less in American society where we've come to do some of that work, just because, perhaps it's not as necessary because they can pay the bill without having to work. So I think there's a combination. However, I think there is a little bit more of that coming back, and people are recognizing the interest in that.
Really?
Whether that practically becomes applied throughout, we'll have to see. But I think there's at least some acknowledgement in some of the Adventist education that it's important outside, whether it's an office job or whether it's, physical or whatever it may be.
I was interested in that also, reflecting on my own childhood. During that time, it was, at least this is how I perceived what we were told, that there is a dichotomy between manual work and intellectual or education-based work. basically, what I understood is that we are told you better learn, otherwise you have to work.
Interesting. Okay. And here it was. I was brought up. You have to work to be able to learn.
Yeah, and it was inconceivable for a child to be asked to work while in school. It was considered that school is his work.
Interesting.
If the child is good in schools, which was not always the case,
Right.
of course, but it was considered this is his occupation.
Yeah.
This is all.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was.
So it's quite, very, very different mindset. And I hope we'll understand that and realize that actual work while doing schooling is very important. And as you said, after too many hours or days or years in school, you begin asking, why do I need this?
Yes.
What's the practical? And so you absorb lots of learning, and next day after the examination, you lose it.
Right.
You throw it away because there is no connection to life.
Yes.
But as you said, when you are in the situation to apply this and that, it remains there probably forever.
Right. Yeah. Part of it I think was for us was somewhat of a necessity. A father on a minister's salary and mother on a teacher's salary. It was kind of everyone pitched in to do their part because we wanted to do Adventist education, and there's certain goals we had, and so it was just kind of a family. This is what we all did. We all pitched in to kind of do different things. But I think practically as well, the other thing is if you go to school and then you come home, you have your parents as figures in your life, then you have a teacher, and that's maybe it. If you have a job, you also have a boss. And having another adult figure in life can be both a positive and negative, but hopefully it's a positive. And, as you get older, as a teenager, unfortunately, sometimes we don't pay attention as much to what our parents say. But if you have multiple influences in your life, sometimes it puts things in context in a way that maybe I wouldn't have appreciated because, maybe you don't like your boss so much and you come home and you appreciate your parents more, or, there's other things. So I think you're kind of raised by a community in some of that fashion as well.
You are exposed to real life, and you learn how to relate with different people. You say it comes a time when we don't listen too much to our parents. It happened to you, John?
There's always something, right? I don't know that I was a rebel in our family. It was interesting, again, being the youngest or the baby in the family, you're able to observe the challenges between perhaps my sisters and my parents. And, I think, while there would be, natural challenges with teenagers, I would sit there and say, okay, well, I'm not going to do that because I saw what a problem was. I'm going to do this instead. Or, so I don't know that was really someone that would typically challenge my parents. But again, I don't know if it has to do, I have no idea why, but there was just so many different, I was so busy with so many different pieces in my life.
Yes.
Having 2 or 3 bosses and, multiple teachers you're dealing with. And I feel privileged for the life I was able to live growing up. And so I'm sure if you re-interviewed my father and talked to my mother, they would probably give you some stories of how I was challenging or problems. But I don't have some sensational story about going off and drinking or smoking or doing something crazy. Just don't really have those kind of stories. I'm not sure why, to be honest with you.
Yeah. God's providence.
Yeah, could be.
Another thing your father didn't tell me when I interviewed him was that your family also included or adopted some other kids. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Being so young, there was always just other children in our house. It seemed like Growing up, Anna was always in our house. I think she moved in with us when she was about 12, but I was really young, or I don't know if I was even born then. She had a large family in Puerto Rico, and I don't even know exactly why she lived with us, but she was always there and present in our house growing up. And then went to academy and college, and we still stay in touch. And Russell moved in with us during academy as well, and then also Tanique moved with us when she was in academy, and her mother passed away, and she moved in with us, and she was very good friends with one of my sisters. And we still stay in touch with, whether it's Christmas or various different activities. We get to know the children of each of them now. They really feel like part of our family. And recently, Zhedong, he is from China, and my parents met his parents when they were in China. And when he came to America, lived with my parents for academy and college, and now he's at Eastman studying music, his PhD. And I see him whenever I go to Rochester, New York, and that's where he's at school, and I visit him and his wife. And again, it seemed like there was always other kids in our house, and it just kind of felt normal. Maybe when you have 4, what's number 5 or number 6, it doesn't, there's always more. And as a kid, that's great, it's fun. So I didn't think of it too much until, you get older and have your own kids, how much work that is.
So do you think it influenced your outlook, your perspective on life and other people from other cultures, other races and things like that?
I'm sure it did. Again, you growing up, you don't think about that. But I remember simple things like when Anna came, she went to visit her family in Puerto Rico, and she came back and brought an avocado. My dad was so excited about this avocado, and that would have been the 80s. And they weren't as common in America as they are now. But I remember the excitement over these avocados that were brought. And it's different things were always being introduced into our lives. And whether it's through food or just discussions or understanding someone's other way of life that they may be living with their family. Also, I think, whenever someone would be struggling, whether it was school, being able to pay for Adventist education, or troubles with their, family perhaps, and they would come to live with us. I think as I reflect back on that, that was part of my parents' way of helping those kids to be able to stay in the Adventist education system when it would have been perhaps impossible for them. And I think that further instilled in me the importance of Adventist education and the importance of the Adventist, life, and trying to help those around them.
So they are all of them. They are still believers, and.
I mean, Anna and Tanique. I don't see Russell so much anymore. He was much older, but I think most, if not all, in many cases are. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, such a lasting contribution to their life and future, and also to provide you with a broad experience and preparation for real life. I'm very impressed with that. When did you make a decision to follow Christ? Personal decision.
I was baptized, I don't remember exactly when, maybe when I was 10 or somewhere around that age. And it would have been through school. They were offered baptismal classes, and I don't recall much about the classes even now. It seems so long ago. But I do remember sitting it was a small school, a 2-room school. And I remember sitting in the principal's office with some chairs, and those of us studying sat there and studied together. And then I remember being baptized, and my father baptized me, which was a nice experience. And so I remember that fondly. And from there, it just kind of felt like a natural step to take in my life.
Returning to school, you said 2 rooms.
Yes.
So that means several grades were in the same room.
Absolutely.
What are your memories about that, and how do you perceive it now?
Yeah.
Now that's quite rare. Very, very small schools are still like that. Majority, it's Maybe, I don't know, it may sound very strange.
For many it does, and our school here, we've had to explain over years why we had 2 grades in one classroom. But, you know, growing up, I think maybe around 40, 42, somewhere on there was the largest the elementary school got, and that felt really big as a kid. I had no idea that was so small. But it was split for a while, grades I think 1 to 4, and then 5 to 8, 2 different teachers. At some point it was I think 1, you know, room, maybe 1 to 8. I don't know how that would work.
Well,
But so it's grown and shrunk over the years. But I think they've tried to keep it 2 different grades if possible, or 2 different classrooms. I didn't know any other way. It was not, it wasn't until I went to move to Canada when each class had their own grade, and I would thought, wow, they have 22 kids in one class? That's unusual. The school was huge. It was 150 kids. I don't know how big it was. It was very large though. And so that's when I realized how small it was where I was at. But I enjoyed it because as let's say a 7th grader, you look up to the 8th graders and you're right there hearing what they're learning. And, if you have a question or a problem, no matter how large the class is, let's say my 5th to 8th class was, 20 kids, you could have 20 kids in a 1 class school as well. And sometimes the teacher can't get around to answer every question that quickly. But when you have that multi-grade classroom, you learn an environment where sometimes you ask the 8th grader for help because they went through it last year. Sometimes you're helping the 6th grader. So you learn some leadership skills and some ways to help coach them as well. So I think there are some really, big benefits to it.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. Because as I said, like in my country, that would be, very puzzling.
Sure.
Yeah. Because schools usually have several classes all the same grade, like at least 2 classes, 2 classrooms for the same grade, or 4 or 6, or
Wow.
And then when you hear that they have several grades in the same classroom, they say, "Oh, that's." But there are real benefits.
Yeah.
Real benefits.
I do think I'm a point of view person that wherever situation you're in, you can make the best out of it. And so me coming from such a small school, a lot of people would perceive that as you couldn't be successful. And my wife, when she went to school in New York City, some pretty rough environments,
Really?
And she became successful and went on to become an attorney. And so, I look back to inner city education that she was going through in New York City and rural education, 2 very opposite ends of the spectrum. And you can both have a spiritual journey and you can also be successful at the same time. I know there were maybe a number of kids who were not as successful. So
very, very interesting point. Yeah. You are not doomed to fail in any place.
Right.
God has provisions for every person in every place, in every historical time.
as long as you're willing to do your part.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Thank you. At what point did you become in pursuing studies in finances and accounting and things like that?
Well, actually, when I went to college, I went to pursue marketing, actually. And the college had an environment where you could almost design your own degree within a context.
Sure.
And I said, I want to do marketing. I'd always thought that was interesting. And so I went to college.
Excuse me, that was Atlantic Union?
Atlantic Union College.
So that was the first, no, it was, you have all the time been in Adventist schools, excuse me.
And so I went there for marketing. At the same time, I got a job on campus to work, and I got a job actually in the accounting department because my sister knew the accounting manager. She said, I think you'll like working with Marge. She's very nice. And I said, oh, okay, I'll check it out. And I interviewed, and she hired me. And so I got a job working in accounting. Well, after about a month or two of being in college and looking at the 4 years and what it would take to get a marketing degree, I realized I would have to go to take some classes at some other local colleges that would have classes that was not offered on campus. And I realized I don't really have a easy way to get around. That sounded challenging. So I said, I'm not going to do that. So I said, I remember coming into work one day into the accounting department, and I said to my boss, I said, yeah, I'm going to change my degree. Oh, what are you going to do? She asked. I said, I'm just going to do business administration. And you know, in the business school, it was not very large, but it was maybe 75 students. Probably 60 of them are business administration. It was a large degree. And I remember Marge looking at me and saying, John, what do you think someone's going to hire you to administer? What business is going to hire you to administer them after you graduate with just a 4-year degree? And I said, I don't know. And she said, the answer is McDonald's. She said, so if you want to work at McDonald's down the street, keep going with that. Okay, well, what should I do? She's like, why don't you take accounting? And I said, really? She's like, and she explained to me, she said, accounting is the language of business. If you understand the numbers, you understand how it works, you're going to be able to explain it to other people trying to administer their business. They're going to rely on you. And I thought about it for a while, and I worked a few days, and I said, well, this is kind of interesting, and I can always do research. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. So it was not a lot of great thought involved. It was logical. I'm very happy for that guidance, you know, that she gave to me. And so I pursued accounting from that point on.
Then you went out to find work, how it was to find and to begin working.
So again, I'm indebted to some professors. So Mark Heider was a professor at our college. He was a CPA. That was the designation I was seeking. And during college, I was encouraged to always take internships in the summer. And so first summer, I just continued to work in the accounting department all summer. After sophomore year, I worked for the General Conference Auditing Service. And that was very interesting to see that environment. And then the next year, I worked for Adventist Health Systems in Orlando. And after that, I said, man, I really want to go work for Adventist Health Systems. I was very impressed, very well run, Christian Adventist environment. And so I really wanted to do that. At the same time, my professor said, you should consider applying to what was called then the Big Six. That was the largest accounting firms, or apply to various different accounting firms. I said, well, they're not going to hire me, some, you know, little Adventist, you know, going to a liberal arts Adventist college. He said, well, it doesn't hurt. All I can do is reject you, right?
Yes.
Okay. So back then you would write your cover letter and you would put your resume in it, and I got my resume together and had him and others look at it, and I put it in the mail. And I put it in the mail to the top 6 and the next 2 or 3, and I put it to local firms nearby. And I would get rejection letter after rejection letter. And I remember a really small accounting firm, you know, 5 minutes from the college saying, hey, I don't think, you know, you want to pursue accounting, or maybe you shouldn't pursue accounting. I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't very encouraging. And I got a call from one firm. And it was one of the largest firms, and it said, hey, would you like to come in for an interview? And I said, sure, why not? And at the same time, I had been pursuing other interviews. I had interviewed and got a job offer from Digital, which was a computer company back then nearby. And so I was looking at Digital Computers, an offer from them, and I was looking at Adventist Health Systems, an offer from them. But I said, why not try at least the PricewaterhouseCoopers, the firm I'm at. And so I went for the interviews, and I actually ended up getting the job offer. And my philosophy was, the philosophy that I thought about as I debated about it was, where should I go? Should I go to the Adventist Health System or Pricewaterhouse? Was my big debate. And the guidance I was given by some of my professors was, if you go to Pricewaterhouse, you can always go to Adventist Health later. But if you go to Adventist Health, it's going to be very hard to get back into an accounting firm. So maybe you start there, get your CPA license, and then you can go on somewhere else. And so I thought about it, and I said, I'll try that for a few years.
And you are still there?
I'm still there.
How many years?
I'm in year 21 now.
21?
Yes.
Wow. What is your current work?
Well, I'll start by saying a lot of people don't necessarily understand my job. I'll try to explain it as well as I can. I don't think it's complicated to understand it, but I've been doing it for 21 years. I am in what's called assurance, and some people call auditing. A lot of people will think of that term. I don't do taxes, first of all. That's the first thing people think of when you hear CPA, is they do taxes. But in doing auditing, a lot of people here think of the IRS or tax government come checking your taxes and they audit you. That's kind of close, but what we're doing is I am looking at the financial statements of companies, and we are testing those financial statements to be able to provide an opinion that says that they are materially correct or they're correct. And so we're inspectors in some fashion. We're trying to provide assurance to the reader of those financial statements that those financial statements are good. Sometimes you have to say that they're not good, or there are problems that led to it. Other times they're just fine. And so I work on that area, focusing on typically financial services. So real estate companies or investment managers, capital market companies, those sort of companies. And so that's my primary focus right now.
And this is the purpose of this auditing, or to make sure things are correctly done and wisely managed, or there is a certain a need. What's the need for that?
So we actually have a purpose statement we developed for our firm, and it is to provide trust in society and solve important problems. That's the simplest way to describe why we exist. A little more detail in that, it started in the 1800s really, is that if you think about perhaps someone would get a mortgage or get a loan from a bank, you typically provide very large amount of documents because you don't have an audit of your own financial statements provided with a nice cover sheet that says, I audited it and it looks good.
Sure.
And so a bank will have to go through all sorts of detail. Do you have cash in the bank? Have you paid your bills on time for the past? Looking at all sorts of information. And that can be that's fine, perhaps one-on-one, but it can slow things down. And so if I have a client that is on a stock exchange, they're required to provide audited financial statements so that the investors who want to buy their stock can look at and determine whether the information is good or not. And so the trust part of our purpose comes in that if I tell you I have $1 million in the bank, that is something you want to know for sure if you have $500,000 of debt that you can pay for it. But if your numbers are not correct and you're secretly hiding it and saying, well, I have $5 million of debt and only $1 million of cash, you as an investor may want to know that and saying, I think that company is not doing so well right now. Perhaps I should not buy them, or I don't want to get involved with them, or they don't manage their money good. And so that's the reason why we're trying to provide that assurance to those reading the information. We're not trying to confirm whether someone should or should not be involved with them, but we need to provide that trust that the numbers are good. And that's what allows a lot of the capital activity to happen, because they're waiting for these numbers, or they're waiting for the results to happen.
Yeah. So it has to do, I mean, looking into a company and checking the numbers and what's behind those numbers. What's behind everything of that is following management principles. It's a matter of greed versus wise leadership. It's a matter of mental ability, or it's a matter of character, or everything.
It's everything involved. So we are evaluating the board that will oversee these companies. Do they have the right focus? Are they paying attention? Are they not paying attention? Management, are they abusive to their staff? Meaning, are they verbally abusive? Are they
even things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're looking at the character.
Because they don't reflect necessarily immediately in the financial.
They may not, but what it may inform is you may perform additional tests because you're thinking, if they are abusive in that environment, are they trying to be abusive to the financial results and hide something, or do something for their own benefit? And so you may look for fraud differently, or you may just consider other aspects. And so you have to understand the character. You have to, our number one risk is getting involved and working with a company that is not credible. And right there, you're in a big trouble. So we have to spend a lot of time before we even accept a new client, evaluating them as people. What is their track record? How are they interacting? Are they good people? So there's a lot of work that has to get involved with that. You want to understand what kind of controls and processes they have in place. And that's not much different from, say, a church board. You want to make sure that when you get numbers to a church board meeting and they say, we're behind budget, folks, you want to know if that's a real number.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure that your treasurer pulled the information together correctly, that they're on top of things. And so if you had a treasurer that showed up to a board meeting with a box of receipts and things flying all over the place, and they were just, confused and they can't answer a question straight. You say, how much money do we have in the bank? 10,000. Well, if you remove the 10,000, but you take away 2,000, well, but then we have the 3,000 over there, but we also have 1,000 coming in here. You start to wonder, is that person in control? Same time, if you had a treasurer come to you and you start asking questions, they start getting upset or aggressive. That's not right. You don't understand it. That's not your place to ask that question and start pushing back on you. As a board member, your natural reaction as a layperson might be saying, okay, well, maybe that's not my role. If you sit back and think about it, that person may be somewhat abusive, hopefully not in a Christian environment. Are they hiding something? You start to wonder. Are they doing something bad? It is my place to take care of that. And so we do the same thing in our just normal lives as well. And it has just as much importance in our daily lives of how we interact with people as well.
At least judging what we see in the news, in spite of all of those checks and, auditor services and what you do, and lots of reports of dishonest dealings.
Yes.
How it comes?
Well,
maybe the public image is distorted, or
I think it's always a little bit of both. In some cases, someone may have been investing on something that they didn't understand themselves. They thought they did. And there was a risk there they didn't appreciate. So that happens sometimes, and people get upset. In hindsight, they shouldn't have put the money where they put it. Other times, you have dishonest people. A famous case was Bernie Madoff. He stole billions of dollars from people. He wasn't using a large firm such as ourselves. He was using a CPA that wore tie-dye shirts and jeans to a little strip mall to work next to a convenience store and a restaurant, and he was dishonest himself and what he was doing. And we learned from those mistakes, and so now there are requirements that certain people are tested and the auditors are checked. And unfortunately, I think as a society, we typically put rules in place to react to the last crisis, not necessarily always looking forward. And so if there's someone that's going to be dishonest, there's always going to be some opportunity. While we can't hit perfection, hopefully you learn from the past mistakes, but the crooked people learn as well. So it's always a chase to be able to, improve and try to fix problems as time goes on.
Yeah. When you work with the same companies on a long period of time, or
you change every now and then. We're required to change every 5 years, for example, who your clients, I can only be on a job for 5 years at a time. Because after too long, you could become cozy, is the perception. I started working in the Boston office. I worked a few years in Minneapolis. We moved there. And then I've been here in Atlanta for about 5 years. So part of my clients have changed just because we've moved to help other clients. And so it changes over time.
Generally speaking, are they cooperative? Are they willing to open things to you? Yeah, they do.
Yes.
They realize they need it. It's not something imposed on them. They need it.
It's a little bit of both. Yeah. So I understand after 20 some years, when you walk in a room, there's always some angst of the auditors are here. So I can appreciate that. It's kind of like a necessary thing that they have to have. And I think the executives typically truly understand it. At the same time, it's a lot of work to get through, and there's some pain involved. So, you have different personalities, and some people are more cooperative than others, and it doesn't mean they don't like you or want to help you. It's just, it could be a burden to them. And so that's part of the challenge, is how do you get the job done while keeping people happy, while keeping your mission in mind of, what is your purpose, and so it's a bit of both sometimes. There can be some challenges, but there can be some great opportunities too.
Yeah. Speaking of numbers, after all, you'd expect that numbers are numbers. They don't lie. They don't. They don't. You can't say it could be like it could be this. It could be that. It's a number.
Right.
But it's not always like that. What it takes to read the numbers in the right way?
I'd say, thinking about it for, say, someone on a church board or a school board, where you're not every day going through this, I'd say what it takes is having the courage to ask questions, and knowing that sometimes you ask a question that's not too smart or comes across as not too smart. But sometimes when you ask those questions, you get the best answers or the best things found. So, someone will say, this is our number, and you say, well, that doesn't make sense to me. How come that's our number? Or why does this balance seem so low? I thought it would be higher. And if you ask those questions and probe and have the courage to do that, sometimes you'll find there was an error. Or sometimes you'll find that, oh, well, you're absolutely correct, but the way that shows up is it shows up in next month's books. And this is okay, fine. Ask another question. Why does it not show up in this month's books? It shows up in next month's book. The more questions you ask, the more you learn, and the more that you understand yourself. At the same time, it makes the person taking care of those numbers more aware that there's someone asking questions. You can do it in a respectful way. You don't have to be confrontational. But I'd say most people, it's scary to them, to be honest. You sit there in a board meeting, someone explains it, and inevitably the treasurer looks around. Any questions? Nothing. Maybe there's one question. Someone doesn't want to ask that stupid question. They don't want to come across as not smart. And what happens is maybe someone steals money or something bad happens. And 6 months later you look back and that's what happened, and you think back to that time where you should have asked that question. You think, I knew there was something wrong. Well, it doesn't help you as your fiduciary responsibility. You should have asked that question too. So it's hard. It's another language. That's absolutely true. And I think it's fair that you think about what's important to you and asking that finance person to explain it to you in a way that you can understand it.
For the last 2 minutes of our conversation,
Sure.
Believe it or not, we are almost done. You're also quite involved in education, not as part of your job, but as an extra,
Sure.
as a volunteer. You are very much involved in the operation of the school of our church, Atlanta North School, and you are also part of a board providing leadership for education in public schools. Why did you become involved in those activities? Because I think your plate is full with your job and with 4 kids and...
Sure. Yeah, I don't know why, if it was just a natural extension. My mother being a teacher, always involved in going to Adventist education. I really enjoyed my college and my years in college. And so when I lived nearby, I would want to be involved in helping them. And people would ask for help to do different parts, and I'd be happy to do it. And so it just kind of became natural over time. But also, I really had a wonderful experience in Adventist education. And, I don't like that I see numerous Adventist schools closing over time. And so if there's something that can be done to help, why not? I now have a personal interest because my children attend Adventist education, and I want to see it be successful. I want them to receive the best education they can, why also be an Adventist education. And so I think it's critical. So I don't know the exact motivation, but it's just kind of come out of, I guess, my years of different experiences over time.
So obviously you're still you're a strong believer in Adventist education.
Absolutely.
You have been through it. You have your children to it, and what about public education? You are part of this. What's the name?
It's called the Georgia Leadership Institute for School Improvement, or GLISI for short. I was asked to be involved from our firm likes us to be involved on at least 2 boards for not-for-profits to help out. And I was asked if I would be helpful in this one. And I said, sure. I think it's a great organization. I can appreciate that our education cannot serve every single person in the entire country.
Yes.
And that there are a lot of children in public schools. And the concept behind that institute is that you can help to improve the students' performance by helping to instill improved leadership within the schools as well. So if various teachers or principals can be given skills to help them become more effective leaders, that can help empower the students and the community around it and make it a better place and have those children have better opportunities down the road. That's kind of how I interpret what their mission is, and I think that's a very noble mission, and a lot of students need help out there. So I'm happy to take a small part in that, very small part in that with the board.
So that board is doing research, evaluating the system, or providing something like continuous education for teachers, or
more education.
Yeah.
So teachers will come together at what they call a base camp for annual trainings, and then there's follow-up trainings throughout the year. You might have a teacher that there seems to be potential for long-term being an administrator, where maybe that teacher starts getting involved early to learn the skills and how they manage the classroom more effectively and how they can help those students become better. And so this institute is helping to train those skill sets. What they're doing. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. How old is your eldest child?
10.
10?
Yes.
Do you know anything about, it's a boy or it's a
girl?
A girl.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about her future plans as a career?
She has many ideas. She has many interests as well.
Yes.
It seems like every few months it's a different idea. One moment we think she could go into biology, botany to study, plants. Another work with animals, arts. Who knows? So I'm not exactly sure where that's going to go, but I'm sure it'll be wonderful.
Well, I wonder if I'll live long enough, and if this program will live long enough. One day to interview her as well.
There you go. Another first.
It would be a first 3 generation.
There you go. That's great.
Thank you very much.
Thank
May
you.
God continue to bless your family, your extended family, your own family, and your work and our schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your leadership also.
Thank you.